Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a sleep aid podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Do you find your mind spinning and churning? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering into your daytime problems. The ones that you can't solve right now and will probably be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns but slowly letting go and drifting into the deep night. This week I'd like to talk about Radio Public. They are an outlet for many excellent shows, and they do a lot of work to promote the medium of podcasts. They provide very good embedded players and a high-quality podcast app, which is available on the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store for Android. It's a very good app which, besides helping you listen to your favorite podcasts, also makes discoverability quite a pleasure. It has a very good recommendation engine. And another reason to promote it is that it also does pay out to podcasts that get listeners on the app. So if anyone is listening and enjoying the show and isn't overly attached to a specific podcatcher of any particular type, I'd like to request that you try out Radio Public. What they do is they put an ad at the beginning and end of each episode, and then eventually some kind of money pays out if enough people listen. I have no control over the advertising that they use, so I'm also curious if anybody does use it, if they could provide me some feedback to see what sort of ads they are like. But obviously the main thing you're listening to the show for is to help you sleep. So if they're really loud and disturbing and unpleasant to listen to, and they're compromising how you sleep, please let me know, just so that I know whether or not to actually punt it, to push it on to you, the listener, and recommend it. Because the point here is to help you sleep, not keep you awake. Yeah, so I would humbly request that you try listening on the Radio Public app if you can, and if it's unpleasant for you, please let me know, and then, like I say, I'll stop recommending it to people. But for now, it's a good way to help contribute possibly to the running of the podcast. Other than that, obviously, I would like to request that you share as much as possible about the show on your social media. The best way to get the word out actually is just word of mouth, obviously. If you're on Twitter or Facebook, recommend to your friends and family. There's a lot of people out there who struggle to sleep, and maybe this can help them. In terms of social media, you can find the show on Twitter at Sleepy Time Tales, and on Facebook at facebook.com/sleepytimetalespodcast. I also have a website up for the show where you can find all the episodes, the occasional blog post, and also links to the various social media at Sleepytime. The website is sleepytimetales.net. I'd also like you to consider submitting questions and comments, anything you have to say, some kind of feedback. You can send that to the email contact@sleepytimetales.net, and I would really love to hear from listeners out there. I've had a few reviews on Facebook and on Apple Podcasts, which are much appreciated. Now, well, obviously the most important thing for a new podcast is to spread the word. If it's helping you, or you think it can help somebody else out there, please let them know. The second biggest thing actually would be, if you can, help a little bit towards contributing financially towards the running of the show. I'm out of pocket every month at the moment, and I would like to upgrade my equipment a little bit to improve the sound quality. So if my droning voice is helping you out a couple of nights a week, maybe you could help consider kicking a little bit of money into the tip jar on the website, or having a look at my Patreon. I'm not going to go into too many details about the Patreon, on what's on offer. Feel free to go take a look at patreon.com/sleepytimetales. I've got a couple of different rewards levels, but I believe that the main thing is if you find this show helps you, and to the point that you feel like it would help me to continue, if you can, obviously, there's a lot of people out there asking for money these days, and if you aren't financially able, don't even worry about it. But if you do have a couple of extra dollars lying around, it could be helpful to me. Help me do a bit of an equipment upgrade, and like I say, help cover costs. Like I said, there's the Patreon and the tip jar. I'm also not going to go over too many of the details. There's some cool stuff up there, but the main thing is, if you are getting help and feel like you'd like to contribute, that's pretty much the most important part, I believe. If, however, you don't have any money to spare to send directly my way, there are a couple of options as well that you can do to help support. I've already mentioned the Radio Public. If you can listen to it on that app, that would be really, really helpful. And then also the website has affiliate links to Amazon, and I'm looking at signing up for a few other programs fairly soon as well. Those link to mostly sleep aids and that sort of thing, mattresses, beds, pillows, the occasional spray or balm to help you get a restful night's sleep. So check those out, see if there's anything there that'll help you, and anything you buy through the links will kick a little bit of money my way at no extra cost to you. A reminder that the music in this episode and all episodes thus far is Desert Bakumiku. Their music is available on the Free Music Archive. I've linked their website and their Patreon in the show notes, as there's some very cool stuff there that they've released under various names, and I recommend checking them out. And a lot of it also is public domain that would be handy for anyone else who wants to use it for their own podcasts or YouTube shows or anything like that, so worth taking a look. So what exactly is Sleepy Time Tales, and what is a sleep aid podcast? To answer your question, let me start with a common problem. Do you find yourself lying awake at night, with your mind spinning and your emotions in turmoil with the anxieties of 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to talk you into a restful night. I'm someone who has struggled to sleep ever since I was a baby. My parents had sleepless nights with me for many years, and even once I got old enough not to bother them anymore, I always struggled to sleep. It was embarrassingly late in life when I discovered the tendency for droning male voices to knock me out cold at night. I discovered it when I was listening to video game podcasts in bed, and I would find myself waking up in the music credits at the end, having missed everything that I was trying to listen to. Eventually, I started actually listening to podcasts for the specific purpose of sleeping, and fairly recently I discovered that sleep aid podcasts are actually a thing, that there are people out there who are trying to help others get a restful night deliberately by boring them to sleep. And I found a few that, one in particular that really helped me a lot. But when I recommended it to other people, they weren't actually huge fans because they didn't like the narrator's voice. Well, personally, I liked the voice of Dira Scooter of Sleep With Me, but I figured if there were other people out there who had similar needs, who didn't like his voice, so I figured I've got a boring, deep, drony voice, maybe I should try doing something similar. As I say, that one worked very well for me, and so I decided to try something else, and here we are. Every episode starts out with this long intro that, with the promo, is usually about 15 minutes or so. It's there for a reason. The purpose of this intro is to introduce myself to new listeners and explain the concept of the show. And for people who've been here for a while, and I know there's some of you who've been there since basically day one, and I appreciate you all very much, and as much as the new folks. For them, the point here is to help them sort of get their minds into a state prepared to sleep. Here is the time for you to maybe have something to drink, get yourself a nice herbal tea, turn out the lights, wrap yourself up in your blankets, make sure you're at a nice comfortable temperature, warm but not too hot, and prepare for the story, which, if everything goes well, you will not reach the end of. The idea is that you listen to me closely as I tell you the story, that you listen and stop the spinning mind that prevents you, like me many nights, from having a restful night's sleep. Tonight's story is a continuation of our adventures of our little friend Buddy, who, well, this is now the fourth story about him that I've told, who has had magical and amazing adventures in the woods. The stories stand on their own, so you don't necessarily have to go back and listen to the old ones, but if you like, I'm sure there's something delightful there to listen to, at least delightful enough to hold your attention until you fall asleep. The idea here is that these stories that I tell don't keep you too engaged. The point is that your mind is held by what you hear, but not so much that it grips you and keeps you awake. I'm hoping that you'll sleep before I get to the end of the story, but don't feel pressurized. It may not work on the first night. Maybe it will take a few nights for you to get used to listening to my voice. My accent may be quite strange to you. Maybe one episode isn't long enough. It's very important, though, that you try to relax. If you're new to the show and prone to late nights staring at the ceiling, it may take a while, even a few days, for this to work for you. It can take a while to develop new habits, especially if you have decades of the habit of not sleeping, so take your time and don't put yourself under too much pressure. So queue up a few episodes or run through the backlog or set a timer to turn you off after an hour or turn me off after an hour. What I do with sleep podcasts is I'd actually just let them stream all night. I lie down in the dark with my earbuds in and let them run. Sometimes when I wake up at 3 a.m. the stream is still running and I let the voices waft me back to sleep. Some nights, some mornings I wake up 30 minutes before my alarm goes. It actually happened to me this morning. I just carry on listening and I fall back asleep again. I can tell you now, there's something about that 30 minutes that's the most restful part of the night. There's something about allowing yourself to relax completely right before the alarm that's just really deeply satisfying. And so you have the basic idea. You relax and you lie in the dark, and while you do that, I tell you a tale. So relax, dear listener, my nighttime friend who's elected to lie in the dark listening to my voice. You will always be safe with me. I'm here to help you relax, to improve your life, even if it's only in a small way. People don't sleep very well these days, and it makes their lives harder. So I'm here to do my small part to help you in a big way, to help you to face tomorrow and the day after, well rested and better able to cope and process. I believe very strongly in the benefits of kindness. I want to be kind to you. I want to share kindness with you. I want you to be kind to yourself. So don't beat yourself up or rebuke yourself over not sleeping. Don't get tense if you just can't get yourself over the edge of sleep, even with me here in your ears trying to help. Frustration, in my experience, is one of the great enemies of a good night's sleep. The intention with this podcast is to short-circuit that frustration, to distract the feeling that we get when we blame ourselves for not being able to let go and drift into the dark. So take a breath and forgive the fact that you can't sleep, and let my voice wash over you and under you. Take another breath. Imagine the warm darkness rising up, inviting you to sleep into a better life starting tomorrow. And if you can't let go, forgive yourself and try again tomorrow. If you've had a life of insomnia, sleep is something like an enemy, but it is not your enemy. It's a natural process that we've been pulled away from by stress and life, and what they call progress, but actually just shines bright lights in our eyes at all hours. I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. Buddy saves a pixie. When I was young, and I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere, in the South Africa. We didn't have much in the way of natural forests. The farm did border what looked a lot like a forest, but really it was more just a pine tree plantation for trees being grown for paper. The area I grew in was naturally quite arid and didn't have much in the way of ancient trees. The few that were around were, as I said, the paper trees and various evergreens that had just been planted willy-nilly all over the place. The natural trees that grew in the area were more wattles. They were more like large overgrown scrub bushes that would be eaten down or beaten down or burned down constantly, but would constantly regrow. They were just giant weeds, really. They mostly were a nuisance. The farm I grew on had little springs at fairly regular distances. Well, they've seemed fairly regular to me when I was very young. If you walked the length of the farm or drove the length of the farm, you'd come across these little copses, these clusters of trees around springs and streams. Those areas weren't really much good for farming, so they were just left, and those trees probably were a solid age, although not particularly ancient, I would guess. I used to love during holiday time to just go on long walks. The farm, there was nothing particularly exciting, and parts of it were cultivated and parts of it were just grazing land for dairy cows. One time I went to one of the little copses that I mentioned, the little clusters of wattle trees around a spring, and I imagined, or maybe I did hear, I don't know, I was very young, I was probably 7 or 8 at the time. I was sitting there and I heard what seemed to me like drumming coming from a very long distance. I wasn't near any kind of habitation or road, so I believed for years that it was like some kind of fairy drumming or something mystical. More realistically, it was probably just a car in the distance with some kind of trick of the sound, bringing the drums the great distance, far much further than seemed likely to young me. But even the miserable forests, the young, fast-growing pine trees that were grown for 20 years to be harvested for paper, and the gnarled wattle trees that were really just for goat food and burning down periodically, even those have a mysterious energy to them if you the imaginative type, the sensitive type who feels like something is going on in the world around you just a little bit beyond where you can see. I've never been somewhere that has really ancient forests. The sort of redwoods of North America and the ancient forests of Europe, or even the jungles of Central Africa, seem very mysterious and almost magical to me. Hopefully one day I can travel and see some of these places. I'd imagine that the ancient woods and trees, to those who have a bit of a inclination towards the romantic and the mystical, may seem like something rather amazing. Trees there that are thousands of years old or tens of thousands of years old, being cut down for timber, but there's still lots of those woods that are still protected and still safe. And it must be quite an amazing experience to be in an environment like that. And one day, I hope that I can be in something like that. I'm a beach boy. I live near the ocean at the moment, and it's where I've always felt at home. But the woods and the forests, there's something about them that really does call to me. Ancient forests must be something pretty amazing, filled with wonder and magic, or at least seem like they are if you're the person who wanders and loves the idea of magic. The deep forests of North America, from what I've seen, it seems almost logical that there's strange, undiscovered creatures living there. I don't know if Bigfoot is real or not. I'm inclined to be skeptical, but from what I understand what those woods are like, it's not completely beyond the realms of possibility that there is something out there that just cannot be discovered, even in this day and age with everyone with a high-definition camera in their pocket. Bigfoot can be, or any other creature can be very far out there in the distance where by the time you find them, your batteries are flat and you can't take a photo. The deep forests must make the possibility of mysterious creatures seem uniquely compelling. Well, I've been talking about my own relationship with trees and forests, and talking about Bigfoot. Of course, you're not here to listen to my story, but we're here to learn about Buddy. Now, Buddy, he hasn't as yet met a Bigfoot. Maybe he will one day, I'm not sure. He's already met gnomes and goblins. And, well, if you listen to the title of this episode, it's not going to be surprising that today he meets pixies. Now, pixies are woodland spirits from European mythology. So why am I telling a story about European creatures in American forests? Firstly, because what I've looked at of Native American mythology, while interesting, I feel like it's something that maybe I should rather avoid, just out of respect. I wouldn't want to step on any toes and offend anybody. And it's very easy to mystify or mysticize, I don't know what the word would be, the idea of the noble American natives, the sort of thing that in the 90s would probably be considered progressive, but now we look at it and go, oh, man, can't believe we felt that way about these things back then. Better than rank malicious racism, I guess, but potentially still harmful in a lot of ways. So from my personal perspective, I just think it's safer to avoid too many of these subjects. I did touch on them early with stories about the bear, but yeah, generally speaking, I'd rather avoid them. And also from a storytelling perspective, the idea that immigrants from Europe would have brought their myths and their legends with them, and maybe even those very creatures that they believed in may have come with, borne by winds and waves and ships and imagination. So today, Buddy is going to meet some pixies. And again, I'll highlight something I've highlighted in every single episode, that while I'm not 100% sure I've got an outline of the story written, but it may go in unexpected ways for me even, but Buddy will always be safe. Our little man is never going to have anything majorly bad happen to him, because I don't do child in peril stuff, and even in fiction I don't appreciate children being threatened, so I avoid it as much as humanly possible. So nearly 10 minutes into the story, and it's actually going to begin. It was one day in the depths of summer when Buddy was in the woods. He was playing with his gnome friends, his very best friends, Freddie and Crystal and Carol. He had spent quite a lot of time visiting with them in their homes and visiting with the goblins and learning to help them mine. He was actually starting to develop a little bit of a skill as a miner, and they'd even allowed him to work on some gems that he then later gave to the gnomes. He wanted to give some to his mother, but he thought it might be a little bit strange and difficult to explain to her how he got actual worked gemstones while he's wandering in the woods. Today, though, they're out in the open, very far from any kind of habitation or any chance of coming across people. The gnomes were preternaturally sensitive to the surroundings. Animals around them knew if humans were nearby, and the gnomes would pick up on that very quickly and would go silent and get Buddy to be quiet. But it was very rare. These forests were thick and deep, and there wasn't much in the way of human habitation around them, so they played largely undisturbed for a lot. A favorite game among the gnomes and Buddy was hide and seek. Remember, of course, that the gnomes could hide in trees and rocks, and they were also very competitive, so they did occasionally have the tendency to cheat and hide in places Buddy could never find them. And if he couldn't track one down, he would run around with a stick and bang on every tree and rock that he could reach, and eventually they would come dashing out when he banged on the tree that they were in. When it was Buddy's turn to hide, they pretended for a while that they couldn't find him. Even though he was young and small and spry and quick on his feet, He was like a galloping elephant compared to gnomes and the other creatures of the forests. But in the interests of a good game, they would usually pretend that they couldn't find him for a while. In fact, sometimes they pretended so long that they kind of forgot where he was, because they were slightly flighty creatures with a tendency to have their attention. Well, when their attention wasn't held for long, it would wander off to something completely random. But anyway, they would eventually find him hiding in a bush or climbing up a small tree. He wasn't the strongest of climbers, which is just as well, because the gnomes were really small, although they could climb trees very well, but he could have been tricky to find if he was too high. They also liked, as well as hide and seek, they liked to play tag, or even like a hybrid game. When someone was found, or the last hider was found, they would run screeching through the woods, and the others would chase them to try to tag them and stop them and make them the seeker. The game it was a very noisy game. They were screeching and yelling and carrying on, and the animals, if it had been 2 or 3 humans playing a game like this, they would have avoided it. But the animals knew the gnomes, and they were getting to know Buddy, so that they knew the environment was safe. They would run screeching past deer and rabbits and birds, and the animals would look at them quizzically and mystified, but not particularly bothered. The game covered quite a lot of ground eventually. The hiding and seeking and running and screeching, they eventually ended up near a stream. Buddy realized at this point that he was quite hot and tired, so he took his shoes and socks off and dangled his feet in the stream. They wandered up the stream a little way, and they found that it widened out. It seems maybe overstating a bit to call it a lake. It was a wide section of the stream that for some reason widened out and got really, really slow. That was probably knee-high to Buddy. He could walk across the whole thing quite safely and easily. For the gnomes, however, it was quite deep. They skirted around the outside and went up to a tree that was leaning out over it. The gnomes looked up into the tree and looked quite excited. Buddy was wondering what they were looking at, and he splashed up and he looked into the tree himself, and he couldn't believe what he saw. Well, actually no, he probably could believe what he saw. He'd seen some pretty strange things in his short time in the world, and his even shorter time wandering in the forest. So he was initially surprised, but not too surprised, and rather delighted when he saw the pixies that were flitting around in the top of the tree. The pixies were tiny humanoids, exactly shaped like humans, very